Right, so I saw that דווקא הכוונה המושרשת בעצמוס האמצעי in the Brias of elements was carried out precisely through the sphere of Malchus. And that brings about the union of the way the Pinus Birurim to bring, and the Pu'ula of Vedas Birurim, which all was to bring the Dover Haki Rochek Kaviochum from the Eberster. In other words, the Nitzutzis that fell in even that they need to be Mispara, and Mispara Alidei, the Nishomets, Lamata, the Vedas Nishomets, in their Yerida Lamata, Begufim, and they bring Mina Yitzia, Mina Hefer, and they bring the Nitzutzis to a Rotzoi, or the Nefesh Abamis of the other. And through that he causes Anali and all the other Nitzutzis, Shiyodu, Beshfil Sakelim, Otoyu, and he causes in them a Rotzoi Elakus. And that's what we saw, the chapter, the Dova HaTachtoin Mizbarer. We saw that the pshat was it's nasa kli, and we saw that was through the union of the rotzen of the Dova Hamishparer, that it itself wants and is an even of yearning, and rotzoi la'elchut. Become, instead of it being in a form of nafila, the yerida, and the distance me'oyer upon of his barach. And we saw that the Aveda of the Mavarer is that he causes it to become a Kli, Manish, to Elkus, but that was the union of its Rotzoi and its Rotzen, Dafke, to be Eila to Shersha and to be Mistabik in the Eibster, the Moki of Shersha, Volad in the Tutis, and Dafke Adidezen, Nishlema HaKavona HaMushreshes Be'atzmas. That's the completion, or that's what the perfection of the Eibish's Kavona, and we saw that the Koyach that Malchus had to carry out that function, that's because Malchus, as we saw in our Maimah in Mitzvah Hazais in Pasha Nitzovim, Noetz Tchiloson B'Seifon, that the Davki in the lowest of all the spheres, which is Malchus, Davki there is literally hammered in or jammed in the tchila. And we saw the whole piyah when we get to the tchila, what that means, atzmas. Ain't safe the Eibishter, how he is higher than all of the Giluyim, all of the Inyonim, which are in any way a shoyrish to the Bria, no dafki be'atzmas ain't safe. We saw that was tchiloson. And no, it's tchiloson b'seifon, that union of the tchiloson is dafki to be found in the Seifon, but that's the union of Malchus. And we saw that dafki ali dezeh, Masa aliyus HaMalchus, that Malchus is then oile into Atzmus Mamish, v'nimshach ali dezeh gilu ha'atzmus, but that is the gilu chodosh mam. We went into that whole concept of a new light, a light's never been before, an chodosh, but that's the gilu of the Eibishter, how he is at Piatzmusay, what is even really higher than the whole concept of Ur, as we pointed out at some length yesterday. So here the intelligent reader and the reader who's medactic per inyanim is Mishra with the question, what does it mean by saying that this inyan is Bekoya HaMalchus? What do we mean saying that the power of Malchus that causes all of these inyanim? All that Malchus does is that it brings about this inyan. It causes that through the sphere of Malchus you have the Yerida into element Bria Yitzira V'Yah Asiyah, and Mamela you get Sof Kosof, the descent of the divine Ashpor and the Oiros into Olam Hazeh. And in Olam Hazeh Kufa we saw that the Yerida and the Netzutzis even further, the day Shviras HaKelim, the Toyehu, that all happens through the union from Malchus. What do we mean by saying that Malchus is the Koyach that causes all these birurim. The union from the birurim are caused through the mensch, through the neshama. That Malchus brings about this whole situation, and then the neshama comes into the world, the neshama being the mensch, for our purposes, and then he's misasik, like we saw, that he busies himself with the union of the world, of the Elam, and he causes an aliyah. He finds all these fallen tzitzis through his avodah, and he elevates them back to their shoulders, and that causes this tremendous nachas ruach lifnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. What that gufa needs to be understood. What is the pshat? That's a nachas ruach. Why is it, etc. Etc. Why do we say that dafki in the union from Malchus is the koyach of all these inyanim? Malchus only brings about the field, and then the neshamas are the ones who do the trick. The Ika is mitzad the maila of the Adam, that he causes the whole inyan to go back. Why do we say no? It's dafki because in Malchus, because no, it's chilos and b'seifan, whatever this koyach to return the nitzutzis, to cause them to become a kli to elakus, min ha'hefech el ha'hefech, that's dafki in the koyach of Malchus. We need to understand there seems to be a connection and a essential interrelation between the neshama and how the mensch is a neshama here lamata b'teich gufa in the oilom, and this union that Malchus, that dafki brings about the whole union of the aliyas and the tzutzis and making them into a kli. But through that there can be dira loyes parak taktoinim, that causes the union of the dira in the taktoin. Why is it dafki through the union of Malchus? And then we say that through that Malchus goes back to a cherish and Atzma saying, and then through that this kilo cause, we need to understand that also. What does it mean that Malchus goes back to its cherish? Why is it connected to dafki with the union from Sfiras HaMalchus? The mensch, he should go back to his cherish, where he should get a tremendous yafshakoyach, or something should occur from the mensch, that he achieved all this. And remember, he's the one that makes the deal. So why is it all connected dafki with the union from Sfiras HaMalchus? So we say that dafki, it goes back into its cherish. What does that mean? And then why is it that when Malchus returns to a shirish, then there's a gilui of the atzmas, and that's the union from dira b'taktoinim, and we see that dira b'taktoinim is a chada. It's like a new light. That's the union of the dira, the hainu atzma saying. And you say, what's got to do with the union of Malchus? Why do we give the whole ultimate credit in the whole biur to the union from Malchus? Sfiras HaMalchus down. Sfiras HaMalchus is one of the factors of the Ikeh. Poyel, as Adira, that's Alidei Adam. And that's the whole pshat. In Dira is Bara B'Taktoinim. The Eibush wants a Dira B'Taktoinim Mach. I mean, is there any problem? Who can possibly tell the Eibush what to do? If he wants to make a dira b'taktoinim, he can make a dira b'taktoinim. He makes taktoinim and put himself in the taktoinim. Where's the big trick bedover for the Eibishter's point of view? Eladin, if a dira b'taktoinim is dafki that the mensch makes the dira b'taktoinim. That's the pshat. Dira b'taktoinim is that al yidei ha'odom there becomes this possibility of dira b'taktoinim al yidei what he is. We saw he causes all the dvarim shenaflu b'taktoinim to have this tremendous desire and this will to become a kli, and alidei zeh, he causes in them the keli to atzmas ein say. So why is it connected dafki with the union from Sfiras HaMalchus? The ultimate biur b'kol dvarim is that Sfiras HaMalchus is not chilos b'seifan. The Sfiras HaMalchus goes back into its shoulders, and that's ma'ira. Well, we also need to understand that. What does it mean it goes back to its shoulders, and through that it then comes out the union from Gili Chodom. How does that work? I mean, we're talking mamish about Musa Yisbarach, And what does it mean that this causes an arousal and this causes a gilui of an chodesh? Was it the pure? Yeah, b'chol ha'dvarim was it the interrelation between so-called the mensch and Sfiras HaMalchus? We now begin the Biur Hadover. V'zeh she'omer Razal gimel keshorim hei. This is what our sages said, that there are 3 crowns. Keser Torah, v'keser Kahuna, v'keser Malchus. It's missing. This is a very interesting misprint, but it's missing the 3rd one. Keser Torah, Keser Kahuna, Keser Malchus. And then the Mishnah says, Keser Shem Toiv Oilo Al Gabehe, or Oile Al Gabehe. There is a 4th Keser, which is called the Keser of good name. Keser Shem Toiv Oile Al Gabehe, and it literally goes up on their backs, so it's Oile. It elevates itself over them. So this is the famous Mishnah in Pirkei Avos, in Perek Daled. What the Baal HaMaimah, the one who said this, is Rabbi Shimon. What Stam Rabbi Shimon, but Mishnah is Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. And it comes kilo in the middle of almost nowhere. It comes in the middle of a series of inyonim in the Mishnah. It's not even like a Mishnah all of a time. The Mishnah begins over there by saying that you must be very careful with learning Torah, particularly if you're teaching Torah to others. You have to be very careful. Ki shigegas Talmud, shigegas limud oile zodai. If you have an unwitting mistake in Dinei HaTorah, then that's considered a deliberate error, how to call it a meizik error. Because if you teach somebody that inyan, or you yourself understand the inyan, and you bring out a hoirah, an instruction, and then people do according to that, and if it's not right, then there's a big blunder that in the world it was carried out in Yonim, which are not Lafi Kavanot, yes, is Barak. It doesn't matter whether you meant it or you didn't mean it, whether you were, how to call it, whether you were shoygig or whether you were, that's amazing. That an improper thing has happened in the world. That's like as if you deliberately made it doesn't help to come on and say, oh, I didn't really mean that, I really meant something else. But in the meantime, the thing has happened, and there's an unwantable Matthias that people have done kach v'kach according to the Torah, and it wasn't right. So this to come on earlier. The fire, you have to be very careful with learning Torah. Ki shigegas Talmud oile zodai, as they state in the Mishnah. And then immediately after that comes along Reb Shimon, and he says, Gimel Kesarim Haim, and then he says, V'kesher Shem Toiv Oil Al Gabehe. And Kilo Sholomah Ad Yisrael, that's the completion of the Mishnah, and starts off another. So it's interesting to be Choyka V'Doirish. What's the connection between, it's all like in one Mishnah, what's the connection between the first statement of the Mishnah and Rabbi Shimon? But since we see that everybody is sort of very, to use the expression, dahui l'siri, they're all sort of deeply in some sort of shlita samoychin, very, very heavy, without any real signs of any pilots, one way or the other, so we'll just have to go ahead without getting too complicated. Or suffice it to say, what does it mean that there are 3 crowns? What's the pshat? Pirush, 3 crowns. There's the crown of Torah, there's the crown of priesthood, of kahuna, and there's the crown of Malchus, which is kingship, and then there's another, a 4th crown, which is Keser Shem Tov. What does it mean? Keser Torah or Keser Kahuna? What are the types of Keser? What do we mean? Because a crown is a It's a crown. It's a sign of rulership or kingship in Pasha. Comes on the Bar Tanura over there in the Mishnah. The Bar Tanura said, what do we mean by saying Keser Kahuna or Keser Malchet? That means the word Keser indicates the possession of Koved. How would you call it? The worthiness of Koved. That, in other words, honor and respect are due to somebody who has these three inyonim. If somebody who has Torah, you have to give him Koved, Pesukim there, maybe it's a king of Koved, and so on, Pesukim, to show that somebody who's a fan Torah, he has a lot of Torah, and you have to give him Koved. Even from Malchus, a Kohen, we said also to dinner, you have to be Machalak a Kohen, Koved, you have to give him something. Let's call up the Torah first, also to Binyanim. Kohen Gadol, for sure, is a mensch who's moved up, the Kohen, and Kol Ha'am. Yeah, Kahuna is a Indian which also demands a certain cover. And even from Malchus, even from a king, Bavadai, demands one of the Inyonim of a king is that he benefits from the Indian from cover. Glory, honor which is given to him. And then he says, however, was it Indian from Keser Shem Toiv? But the word Shem Toiv means a good name. So even good name also brings a person covered. Also brings him cover. How does he get that cover? How do you get a good name? So says the Bar Tanura, a very interesting thing. He said you get a good name alidei what you do, alidei your deeds. Alidei what do you get a good name? Through what you actually affect the world and other people around. And he said that's the difference between Keser Shem Toiv and the other three Kesorim. Well, maybe not Torah, but Keser Kahuna and Keser Malchus, they are things which are mitzad the Etzem Odom. Somebody who's not a Kohen can never have that covered. That's something in the Etzem makeup and domain. The same with the Indian from a Melech. Not everybody can be a Melech. We see it in this week's Parashah. We have the Parashas HaMelech, that he has to be Davke Aish Miyuchad. He has to be Davke Mikerav Achecha with the ganze. Yeah, with the ganze. We see that only it has to be Asher Yivcha Avaya Lekeh. He's going to be chosen, but it was a very special man. And that's more like in him Gufa. The same with Torah to a certain extent. You can learn a lot. Yeah, you can learn, and you get covered with such a learning. Other than even Shem Toiv, Zot the Bar Tanura, that's a inyam which has got to do dafki with what you are in Maisa. You don't get a Shem Toiv just from being a big Baal Moichin. You get a Shem Toiv from the good things you do. In other words, that you are well known to praise in the eyes of the briois, in the eyes of the people, because of what you do, b'poel mamish in the world. You bring about good things, you get a good name. Those are good names. So therefore, we find that the Indian of a Kohen Gadol, that he doesn't have a good name, that he's killed as Kohen Gadol, even though he's still really the Kohen Gadol, but he loses the whole, how to call it, Koved. And I bring it up on my there's a famous story in the Gemara Masechta Yuma where there was a Kohen Gadol. You know the whole story when there was a Kohen Gadol. Okay, you're supposed to know the story. And there was a Maisa there on which Yom Kippurim, the Kohen Gadol came out to the base of meeting. Everybody was running after him. They had a big, tremendous group of admirers, and the throng were all following him and jumping and jumping. All of a sudden, Shmaya Vavtalion, they were the two big Chachomim in that day, they appear. Everybody left the Kohen Gadol and all ran over to Shmaya Vavtalion. Said to Rebbe, said, Los Mani Balav and Meloitz Rebbe. See the two people that they are the Rebbes of that generation. So the Kohen Gadol, he wasn't pleased with that. He wasn't pleased. So the Shmaya Vavtali, and they were B'nai Gerim. They weren't Miyuchosim. Yeah. They actually, according to one opinion, they came from Sancheir, of course. They were Yetchu Chalutov of Sancheir. Well, anyway, they were either they were Gerim Mamish or they were B'nai Gerim, the Shmaya Vavtali. So he walks over to Shmaya Vavtali, he pushes his way through the Kohen Gadol, and he says, these people with the Goyim have come over here and they're taking away all the crowd. And they were sitting in a not complimentary way. So they said to him, well, it's better the sons of the Goyim who do what Aaron HaKohen does, in other words, they're nice to everybody, than the son of Aaron HaKohen himself that's not doing what Aaron HaKohen says you're supposed to do. That's the way they answered him. So, that sort of, to use the expression, that shut him up at that particular moment. So the Bartanura says, you see from that if he's a Kohen Gadol, but he doesn't do the way Aaron is supposed to do, then he loses the cover. It's covered by the Bria. And the same he says over there, Talmud Chacham, it could be somebody who knows how to learn, but he said if he's got not such a good name, in certain inyanim, Cholila, then it can blow the fact that he's a Talmud Chacham, because he knows how to learn, but he's a little bit, not such a good name over there, etc. etc. Hashem, he said, Hashem to you, that's what we perfect all these things. If together with your kahuna you've got also Hashem Teiv, then you're a good Kesser. You got a good Kesser Kahuna. If you got a Kesser Torah with a Kesser Hashem Teiv, then it's a good Kesser Torah. So that's what it means. That Oila al Gabeihen, that the Kesser Hashem Teiv is Oila al Gabeihen, that it goes up above them literally. That it's like an extra kesser that you need, that your kesser should be a good kesser. And if you don't have that kesser, then your ordinary kesser, or bracket, in inverted commas, the kesser which you have below is not really a kesser. In other words, ila al gabeyan, that you need that kesser in order to make your ordinary kesser echet good. In inverted commas, ordinary. And here we see the Dova HaNeisaf, that the Inyan the Kesser Kahuna and Kesser Malchus, they got to do with the mensch mitzat certain yichusim and milas that he had. The evil Kesser Shem Tov, or that's something that you could have mamish do bepastas, and you get it through your own ma'isa. And that's what Shmaya Vavtalian said, that it could be that they were talking B'nai Kerim, but they got their good name through hard work. Das haben sie gesagt in the Maas, dort in the Gemara Masechta. Oh, that's the pshat of the Bartanura of Be'er. So that's a very interesting pshat. So he touches Kesem Kovet. Come on, certain people, and they said that the even Kesem means a little bit more than that. It means like, who gets a Kesem? A king. And a king is a person that he has certain rulership, he's got the ability to literally control others and lead them and rule over them. And that's the union of a Kesser Torah, as a Talmud Chacham is supposed to be a man that he leads the people, he shows them, guides them. A Kohen is somebody that he's got rulership, he's got the ability to bring a kapora for people through the korbanos. And he's also like to put down in this week's parasha. We see in this week's parasha, when we get to the kahuna, that the koyanim atafkid the poiske hadine hatoira. They come to Alisa, ela moke, asher yivcha v'aya lekecha, ela koyan asher yiyeh b'yom imayim, v'dorashta, v'yagidu lecha, and they will tell you, it's Dvar Hashem. In other words, to a certain extent, the leadership of Philo in Inyan Torah are also alidei the Kohen. And a Kohen is also, how much more so? A king is a Inyan for leadership and rulership over the whole country. He's a man, but he has it himself. leadership and Srora. What does it mean that Kesher Shem Tevela Al Gabeihen? A similar in it, that in order for his leadership to be perfect, he can't just rely on milas that he has belavach. It's got to be an initial puyo. He's got to be a king, which is megale, his right to be mistarer al acherim mikoyat zeh, that he's also got poshet in yonim tovim bezer oilam ha'maisa b'vashta. In other words, that if he might be a very brilliant leader, but if he's got bad inyonim, it's not going to help him. And the same benegir to the kohen, etc., etc. So we see that the Shem Tov Oila of Gabin is a similar pshat according to that. The Inyan Kesher Shem Tov is also got to do with inyonim which are outside yichus, they're outside the etzeminim from leadership. They're devoring pushutim b'toich ha'olam. Aber dafke they mefoer and dafke they mechazik the kesser and the rulership of the person who's supposed to be a ruler. What kroivim divrei elu liyesh kedivrei elu. The pshat of the Bartanura with them pshat are similar in the whole content. However, when we look at the nakuda of the word Kesher Shem Tov, Oile al Gabeihem, then according to that pshat, the Inyan, which is obviously a correct pshat, then the Taich Kesher Shem Tov Oile al Gabeihem, here the Taich, that it goes up on the top of them and it perfects what they are. In other words, for them to be an emissary, a leader of the people, they need to have a Shem Tov, and if they got not good Shem Tov, then that's poigim in their leadership. It's felt the Inyan of what we call the Svara, the Srara. Srara means the rulership or leadership over people. Oh, but the bitu of the expression Oila al Gabeihen, when you think about it, it means literally it goes up on their backs. That's the kilo. You would say there's an expression. He crept up on the guy's back. He got up on the fellow. Now, if you creep up on somebody's back, then what happens? You are higher than him. You go up over the top. Oila al Gabeihen, the way we've been teaching it, the Taich day goes up into the same crown, but it makes the crown a stable crown and a proper crown, which means that it adds into the top of the crown, you might say. Oila al Gabeihen, it's like a further shlemus in the crown, in the kesser. Otherwise, that goes up beyond it creeps up on the back of these other kesserim. Oila al Gabeihen, that's cute, like it's metapes. V'oila, it goes up and jumps on the back and reaches some higher point than what they are. In other words, the Taich Kesher Shem Tov Oila al Gabeihen, it's not just like the Bartanura with the other Mephoshim. What they learn, whatever be their pshat, that the Kesher Shem Tov moisif in the Kesher, it just goes up and it adds into the Kesher. Now the pshat Oila al Gabeihen, if we look at it carefully, could imply that it's much higher than what the other Kesorim are. That it's a Kesher Bifnei Atzmei, which is almost like you might call Ein Arich, higher than these other three Kesorim, and it's Oile al Gabeihen, it uses them in order to literally climb and elevate on their backs. Literally, it goes up over their backs into a much higher state of its own, which would mean that the Inyan of a Kesher Shem Tov Lefi Biyozeh is not just another stone in the crown which below it. In other words, it's a further addition and more stability in the crown, but it's like a new madrega, all of its own, which is incomparably higher and more elevated and got in itself a greater pnimius than what they have. And it's kila. You can't even really get to the Kesher Shem Tov unless you go through, or you have these other three Kesorim, and then once you have them, then hu oila al Gabeihen. What's the feast there? It's a fragment, the Shaila, dat Chora im kein kommt, ist der Kesser Shem Tov is einen kloli kilo b'fnei atzma. Yeah, so if you're not a Kesser, if you're not a Kohen, how do you have Kesser Kahuna? If you're not a king, how do you have Kesser Malchus? That you should have all three of them, and then this Kesser Shem Tov will be Oila al Gabeihem. Because according to the Pshat of the Bartanura, the Kesser Shem Tov is the shlemus in each individual crown. According to what you got, that's the shlemus in your crown. If I say Oila al Gabeihen, at a time it creeps up on the back of all these, it would tend to imply that something higher than all three of them together, and it's a shlemus b'fnei atzmai, that you have those three things, and then you get up to a higher union. If through Kesser Shem Tov you creep up on the back of these other kesarim, as it were. Well, if he's ekumtois, we would say that it's a union kloli va'atzmi, which is shaykh l'kol echad ve'echad. Was lefiz evatois kumen that the union from Kesser Torah, Kesser Malchus, and Kesser Kahuna are inyonim in avodas Hashem. They're not necessarily that you're a kohen or a melech or ke'etz, but they're specifically. No, it's talking about kol echad ve'echad, but Klal Yisrael, and each and every one of them has got in himself Torah and Malchus and Kahuna. He has to have in himself these three milah. And then he has in himself noch a milah, the unbelievable milah of Kesser Shem Tov. So let's see what that is. Let's see how we get to that. Because that's the line which is going to be taken in the Maimon. We're going to go more with that line, that these are Kilu 3 in Yonim Achmi, Kol Echad Ve'echad. And their Shorus Lamaila is in Yonim from Sphirus Lamaila. And there's another in it which is Oila Al Gabein, also, which has got a Shorus Lamaila, but who ain't a Reich? The Gabi Der Shorus. But we see the feed there, there's another dogma of how Chabad teaches us the Pnimis and the Atzmius of these Inyonim, how they appear by Maimorei Chazal, and particularly the well-known in the Unifan Pirkei always, but here in this mention there's also Piyurim Nifroim, but Oideis in Maimorei from Pirkei Ovid. Well, we might come to that brief, might mention them briefly when we come to the in the Maimon without going into too much arifas at this particular point. So that's what he says now. Mavua b'maki macher. Mavua b'maki macher means some other place in Siddur. The Kesser Malchus, Hainu b'chinas Malchus ka'atzilas, Shenase Kesser va'atik l'brio. In other words, there was a ding from Kesser Malchus. He said that is talking about Lamaila, the sphere of Malchus. And the sphere of Malchus, as we pointed out, that's a Inin Kloli v'Klol Sabriya. The whole Inin of the Bria, like we just explained in last night's year, it all comes about from the sphere of Malchus. So he said, was it Inin from Kesser Malchus? Why did it touch Kesser Malchus? Why would we say that? And on the contrary, we know that Ein Melech below Kesser. If a man doesn't have a Kesser, then he's not a king. There's without the crown, then you can't really have Malchus. So therefore, if we say that this is called Sfilas HaMalchus, then Malchus demands the union of a Kesser. So what is the Kesser of Sfilas HaMalchus? How it is Lamai. He says that the union, what Malchus becomes a Kesser va'atik l'brio. Well, that makes good sense. Because we have another klal that ain't Kesser, ain't Melech, b'lei om. Unless you have a people, you don't really have a king, and you can't really have the Kesser doesn't really make any sense. Unless there's a om, unless there's a union from a kabji. Don't come to it. That despite the fact that the union from a Kesser is a gewaldige Meile to the one who's mislavish in the Kesser, aber so of the union from the Kesser makes him an elevated entity, legabi things outside himself. The Hainu, what you might call, like everything's lower than himself. And that's what I keep. Ein Melech Beloy, that if you don't have a people with the people that we explained last night, at least with the Kitzur, if not Barichas, is dafka with the separate entities, mamish, from the personality of the Melech. And therefore said the Rebbe, the whole keser of Malchus, the last figure, is what he becomes a keser, a king, and his keser is for the sake of Brio. What Brio is the first of the Elamas, Hanivroim is the first of the Elamas, Hanifrodim, the separate Elamas, Brio Yitzira V'ya Ashia. And on the contrary, the whole Ika Chiddush is after Elama, a Brio. Once you've already done it, then you develop on it as well known. Yitzira, Asiya are just further tikkunim and further hashlomas in the union of the yesh. Once you got a yesh, you just develop it even further. But the big chiddush is that from Malchus to Atzilus, they came about Elam Brio, yesh mi ayin. What is the keser from Malchus to Atzilus? The keser from Malchus to Atzilus, that it becomes a keser of atik. Now the word atik is well known, it's connected with the union of keser, and atik means separate or withdrawn. You know, like we say that Avraham Avinu is written, that he had a tent, and it's written, Vayatek Mishom Hehor, he moved his tent from over there toward the mountain. But Vayatek means he moved over. He separated off from there and he went off over there. But that's the union of Atik, means separated and moved out. It also means the union from Atik, it can also mean the idea of old and way back. How do you call it? Primordial, because we say that in Daniel the expression is used, but again to the Eibishter. Who's this?
Rivkin.
Rivkin, yeah, good. Said it. Saves me a telephone call. I wanted to call him up. And here it brings me in. I just get round to it today, but I intended to call him to find out what was the sound. It just falls down from heaven to my table. He wrote in that all the Yonim should be away from Kosesh.
Man.
Keser of Atik. So Atik means the idea of primordial, way back. Therefore the Eibishter, the Eibishter is called Atik Yoimin, he's called in in other words, that he's like the primordial of all the days, he's way back prior to all the days. Well, that means the idea of ancient and way back, not for our purposes, not really beginning, as you might say. The idea of way back. So therefore, that implies and emphasizes the concept of separation of Avdolah, something which are withdrawn, Uvdolim. And I found the Indian from Keser, the Malchus is connected with the Indian of being called Atik Lebrio. That means that when Malchus Tatzilas makes Brio, which Brio is Yesh Mi'ayin, then it does it in a even that it remains B'tachas Avdolah, from the thing that it causes to come about. And that's the whole idea of Yesh Mei Ayin, that the Ayin does not really become involved in the Yesh. But Pneumius he does, because it's only a koyach of the Ein Sof which can make that. But the way it actually happens, L'Poyel, is that the Yesh becomes Muvdal and separate, and he just says Ayin, like everywhere he comes from. Ayin meaning it's not known, it doesn't have any Hasoga, because the whole idea of Yesh Mi'ayin is that the Mahava is separated and withdrawn from the Mishave. That's the concept of Atik, Keser, Atik Lebrio. That the Eibishter makes Malchus Tatzilas literally become a Keser, and that is through a big Yerida in Malchus. That's what we call Chitzenius Malchus, how it's already become Shayat to be a Keser Atik Lebrio, because Atzilus is Etzem Elikus. Bria is Mamish Anira, Ayesh Mi'ayin. It has to be a big further Yerida in Malchus for it to become this Keser the article of Bria. But that's what happened. In other words, it becomes a crown, and a withdrawal, which we have a primordial power of helium, Lagabi the Indian of Bria Yesh Me'ayim, which is Indian Vanola Mabria. So we see from that the Indian of Kesser, on the one hand, implies the idea of what we said, COVID in the Batim, the idea of being withdrawn and laudated. And here, on the other hand, it implies the concept that there is another entity over which you are ruling, with that idea of Sroda, so that you have this COVID because you are higher and elevated, and you're ruling over something which is much lower than yourself. Therefore, the Kesser in Malchus has got kilo, as it were, two inyanim to it. On the one hand, it's Malchus, how it's shot to Atzilus to, even though it's cutaneous, but it is Malchus to Atzilus. But that means the withdrawnness and the atik and the way back kite and all those inyanim that there is in Malchus. Then there's another Indian which, however, it actually does bring about, it does actually give a ashpah in the form of gilu. But gilu, what that brings about the Indian of the Bria Yesh Me'ayim, the Kesser implies like two inyanim. On the one hand, the laudation of the Kesser. On the other hand, Sofkosov, a relation to, albeit a reich entity, of albeit to another entity. Avamela said the Rebbe that's the Indian from Kesser Malchus. What Malchus Tatzilas becomes the king literally over the beginning of Elam Shvi'ah, Bria, and Mamela over all of Elam Shvi'ah, Bria Yetzirah Ve'ah. That's the Indian from Kesser Malchut. So we see that Kesser is a tremendous laudation, but it's a laudation which is over things which are not be'erach, and yet nonetheless, hidden in that is a tremendous power to make those things which are lay be'erach. And that's the koach ha'achmiyat as it is in Malchus, as we'll see as we go along. But Kesser Kahuna is, interestingly enough, Kesser Kahuna is on a higher madrega begilui advarim than what Malchus is. Even though, as we're going to see, that Dafki Malchus has this tremendous power to bring about the Yesh Miyayim. That's what the idea of Bria is. However, Kesser Kahuna, hu bechinas tiferes dezo, shena so Kesser le Malchus. That it's put down in the Kisvei Arizal, that the Madrega of Tiferes, how it is in the Midas of Atzilus, well, that becomes a Kesser to the union of Sphiros HaMalchus. The Kesser Toiro, what's a Madrega of Kesser Toiro? Hainu B'chinas Tiferes Di'ema Shanasa Kesser Lazor, even higher. This is how the Tiferes, how it is in Bina. Ema is Bina. Tiferes, how it is in Bina, well, that becomes a Kesser to the Midas which are Zor. So it's still going step by step. Malchus is a Kesser to Yesh Miyai, way out there in Elam Nifrodim, which is Betachas HaRichuk Melech. Next, Kesser Kahuna is the Midas, which they're prior to Malchus, and they become a Kesser to the union of Malchus. And from Midas there comes a Kesser through the union of Tiferes and the Midas, that becomes a Kesser to Malchus. So we need to understand how does that relate to the Kesser that we just described. We said the Malchus got a Kesser that's a Kesser Avatik Labrio. So therefore we have to say that it's two inyanim, like we said, that the inyan, what Zoh becomes a Kesser Malchus, or that's how Malchus is shy PMs to Elam Atzilus still. In other words, it's still a Gilui in the world of Atzilus. In order for it to be what it really is, then you have to have this Kesser which comes from the middle. And then there's a further Indian that Malchus goes out into its cutaneous, way out into Elam HaBriya, and over there it becomes a Kesser to Elam HaBriya. In other words, the difference is Malchus out still shy, Mamish to Atzilus, and even for Malchus out becomes a Mokir Mamish Biyah, as it were, in its own, you read of a chitanius legabi halis and atzila. That's what we have to say. Because Kuntais Lafisa, the Malchus already got two ksora. Malchus got a kesser that gets from Tiferes, of Zohar, and it's got another kesser it gets when it goes over into Bimahava the Elamus, Bria Yitzira Vyasiya. So we need to know what's the difference between those inyonim. Ma'hu Hebdil Bein Zer Lazeh. That's what we could call maybe Pnimius HaMalchus V'chit. Betwenius HaMalchus. And then he says there's another one, but that's how the infant Zoh also has a keser. Over that comes from Bina, and that's called Tiferes T'Yeiman as a keser Zoh. The Alter brings us down in Lakutei Torah, Kamei Mekaymes, as well known, the famous poem about Tiferes in Pasha Kedoshim, in Vayikra, in Lakutei Torah, and also in the same general area in Pasha Tazria, the Alter in the Maimer, if the gave Masifta Darakia to Gemara, the Alter brings down a Maimer with that Dibur Hamas. The Alter talks about this in Tiferes Ta'im and Asakes. So what is the union then of these kesorim that we say that first we go with an order? First of all, Eimo makes a keser to the midas. And then we see that the midas, they make a keser to Malchus. And then we say that Malchus is visited with another keser to become the Atik Labrio, to become like the source of the creation, Yesh Me'ayin into Brio. What are these three inyonim? So what are they? So what it boils down to is, it's well known that keser is brought in Chassidus. That keser is the inyan from Rotza. The concept of keser is indicatory of the inyan of will. Rot. And so what is the connection between Rotz and the idea of a keser? Because all the other koichos are governed by the will. All the other koichos are governed by the will. And depending on your will, that's how all your inyonim function. Doesn't matter whether it be your mind, your midas, your action, your machshava, your dibur, your mouth, anything. You name it, then Rotzen's got it. In other words, if whatever you want, that's what you are. In other words, if there's a Rotzen, it'll function. That's a famous statement of the Gemara that Le'elam Yilmayit Odam B'Monkim Shali B'Chofeit. That if a man learns where he's got a Rotzen to learn, then that's where he has Atzlach.
That's a big statement. That's a big statement.
Yeah.
Doesn't really doesn't really work. It doesn't really seem to work that way all the time.
It doesn't work.
If a person wants to, they have a ratzon to be, I want to do, a person wants to have a ratzon, I want to fight the nefesh Bahamas, learn, be a chassid.
No, what it means is, ain't a chanami. But what it means, B'Monkim Shali B'Chofeit, means that in the union of learning itself, things that he has a will to learn. In other words, it's connected also with the concept of time, to a certain extent. Where he has a gishmak in those inyonim, then that's where he'll be much clearer. Or in the place, some are forcing touch, in the place, mamish in the physical place, in the yeshiva, where he has a will to learn, that's where he'll be much clearer. And everybody knows what everybody's will around here is. They should learn Davkir. Betal Chetzmir. Davkir. Betal Chetzmir. Shenikur Mitzadei Zetam. Ertmir. However, suffice it to say that the union of Keser is will. Rot. And therefore we see that's what connects a king with his people, is his will to be. The crown of the king is indicatory of his rot. because a king is a very withdrawn person. That's what he is by definition. He's too high for everybody. You gotta be Megala in him a will that he wants to do the whole thing. Yeah. Once you be Megala that will, then he'll really get moving. It's a very deep will, but it's got to be brought out. So the Inyan Keser is like the revelation of that will that he wants to be a ruler. He causes in himself the gilui of this desire to be a ruler. That's why rulership is connected with will. Because if there's no will, it's not going to work. He's not going to want to become involved in all this tremendous kofeti called running a country. But unfortunately, we are visited with people who have the will, but they have the hepuk of the whole idea of what it means to run a country for Yid. A hepuk, sheba hepuk. Sheba hepuk. Osman, it comes to that the Inyan van Rotzen is like the gilui of the king, which brings him over and makes him rule over people. Otherwise, he's just withdrawn. And that's the Inyan of a Keser. So a Keser is a gilui of a will that certain things in a lower state should be, that the profundity of the will, which is the koach atzmi of the reitzeh, should come down and affect lower Inyan. So what Chassidus says is that nothing happens unless you have a will. Shum davar lo koreh without some form of a will. You've got now moichin, you've got a brain, you had chokhmah, then you had bina. What's the whole tachlis is to get the midah. Unless you want the midah should be, your moichin are never going to produce it. Because moichin and midas are two different things over here. They're two completely different things. A moichin, by its very essence, doesn't want to have to do with midas. Because it doesn't come to the infamid. Now the same thing. Midas into malchus. Malchus means expression. Dibur. The pnimis of malchus is dibur. The fitzonis of it is mind. But the pnimis of malchus is becoming involved in the Inyan, at least al-Chaparim with the koeches pnimim yoter. That's what is the beginning of your involvement. So in order to have that, you've got to have a will. Your midas have got to want to push that. You've got to want through your midas. You've got to have a love and a fear and all those in order to do things the way they should really be done. But if you don't have a will, then you can have all the midas in the world and nothing will really happen. There won't come any dibur, and how much more so there won't be any ma'amud. And so that's what he means, that mitiferes de'emo nase keser lezor, that from the bina, the tiferes in bina, in other words, the high midah in tiferes is called, in midas which is called tiferes, well that produces a will to cause that your bina will go down into your midah. So now why is it connected with Tiferes? What's Davki Tiferes? Because Tiferes is well known as what's called the Kavayim Tzoi, and Tiferes is a union between Chesed and Gvura. But that union comes about mitzad a Gilui of the Ein Sei, a very powerful Gilui. And this leads us to a very big concept which I don't really have time to go into at the moment. There's a very big concept which we discuss a lot in the Torah, at the Baal Shem Tov. Now they are very bekitzer and so on. In Mavini Hador, in the Baal Shem Tov, etc. What he calls about the Yichud of Tiferes and Malchus, the union between Tiferes and Malchus. In other words, that if you want that your understanding should go down and cause midas, it's got to be the best of your understanding. It's got to be the crown of your understanding. It's got to be the best that your understanding can produce. Because otherwise, just some understanding and knowing the Inyan and even be able to talk about it, that doesn't necessarily produce midah. What produces midah is when the pnimis and the emes of the understanding that wants to go down. Well, then you get midah. At a power, you've got to have the Tiferes of the middle. You've got to have the best. And when you have the best, you have the Kavayim Tzoi. Now the Kavayim Tzoi is the Atmos for our purposes. What is a Kli to that? Malchus, Malchus can take that Kav HaTiferes. And if the other middles like Nahi, Eitzach and Huid, if they become involved, then all you get is like, little portions of it here and there. Now, Eitzach and Huid have got other miles. I'm not going into that right now. Each one's got its own mile. Well, in order for things amish to get moving, you've got to have an unlimited power come out into your Malchus, and that's Tiferes, because Tiferes takes opposites and unites them together, because it's the Koach of the Ein Sei. Now remember that Koach of Ein Sei, that goes down into Malchus, right? And that makes a Keser in Malchus. In other words, it causes the ability to express, becomes a kingly ability, becomes a ruling, like one of the Pirushim we brought down in the Gimel Kesarim, that they're ruling power. From the Tiferes of Eima becomes a Keser, a Pirush, that the real Emes Rotzen, that there be midas, expresses itself through Malchus of how do you call it, of Bina. Really it's coming from where? It's coming from Tiferes. It's coming from the best and from the most unlimited part, and that becomes a Keser. That makes the crown and the will push the Malchus of Bina, which is the Gilui, into the middle. Once again, we see that the power of the king is really from a much higher in him, which sets him motivated. It makes him really get cracking. In other words, from the Tiferes inside him, that's what pushes him to actually go down into the middle. The same, the Moichin they are tremendous, and they got tremendous powers, but it's got to be pushed by something unlimited, and that comes into the power of expression of the Bina, which is the Malchus of Bina. That's called Tavuna, by the way, we had that once, and that is ruled by the Tiferes of Eima, and that becomes a Keser Zor. And a similar thing, from Zor into Malchus, the same thing, that if you want that the Midas should produce you speech, and you should start koching it in and to reveal it to the rest of the world, then the Midas have got to say, oh yes, we want to go out into the world. So they'll be happy to stay the way they are. The Midas also, they're like koching around. A person will say to you, oh yes, I really love people, and I really do, and I really love, I do something for the other person, help, do something in the world, you can't leave me, leave me alone, maybe somebody else can do it. And that, from the middle they should come, Malchus, at least it should start beginning to reveal itself, then you got to have a special Keser that comes from once again for Tiferet, and that makes the ruling power of the Midas effect into Malchus. But what is that? Well, that's Dibur, that's speech, Oisiyah. What is really from speak? Have you ever heard the expression? How do they say? Red chain. Have you ever heard that one? He speaks very nicely. But that means he knows how to talk, but nothing very much comes out of it. In other words, the talking, the Pneumius of Malchus is only the beginning. To want to go from that into Maisa, that you got to have another Rotzen, you got to have another will, another pushing of a will, and that's got to come from deep inside the Indian from Malchus. Well, that's the Eivish himself. This is Keser Atiklu Brio that's going to go out into, and that's from the Tiferes of the Eivish to Malchus. He gives the Koach down into Malchus to go over into Mamish Maisa, which is Yesh Mi'ai. Therefore, the Keser of Atiklu Brio is really the highest Keser, in a way. In that regard, because it's pushing everything out into, but it's a Keser. It's got to be a new Rotzen and a powerful Rotzen. It's got to come from a very high source, and that comes from the Eivish himself. Tchilos and Ber Seifon. But we're going to still have to see how does the Mensch fit in there. We haven't got to that yet. We still have to bear in mind our question from the beginning of the time. Plenty of time for that. is that's the three Kesarim. Keser Malchus is a very, very powerful and high Keser. Nonetheless, says over, he said, Gimel Kesarim Halalu, Hainu B'klin Zaksarim, Deseidahi, Stau Shiliyaz. He said, these three Kesers, despite the great elevation that there is, and despite the Keser that there is in Malchus, which Mamish becomes, how do you call it? Keser Atik Labrio, like we pointed out, all those, he said, are the Kesarim of Seida Ishtau Shalaz. So they've all got to do with things which go through a side of the spirit. You go from Eima into Midas, and from Midas into Malchus, and I feel from Malchus out into Masha. It's also a certain Seder which is connected with the. So in other words, the Emes Atzmus hasn't yet come into Gilui. Even in that case of article Bria, to make Bria Yesh Miyayin, as Mamish come the Emes from Atzmus, it's a very high Madrega in Yonim Nailib, but it's not Mamish Atzmus. It's really shy to say that here, Stau Chiles, Kamation is Bulia, Durvan Janchana. Shahem begins Makifim to say this also. Now, why are they called Makifim? Because they're Rotzen, they're Gilui Rotzen. Rotzen is the union of Makif. In order for there to be that Gilui, of the will to bring about a law and Ein Arik Madrega, you got to have an infant for Rotzen. And Rotzen is one of them, is a Makif. It's a all-enveloping power. So therefore, each time you got to move from one thing to another, there has to be a power of Rotzen, a big Makif, which pushes it all into action, as you might say. However, he said, these are Makifim, which are going to shaykh to say that they're Lamaila say these Staush, because they're Makifim, but they're Makifim, which are going to shaykh to Istaush. Ubeshersham be'erein seif, hainu am shocha v'gilui de erein seif. He said that's all in Yonim, which are the divine influence and divine light, how it is in the form of am shocha v'gilui. It's already come out from the Atzmus. It's already in the form of derivation and revelation. And Mamila, it's just got different levels. This is a kesef for this, this is a kesef for that. But it's all in a form of revelation already from the Atzmus for the sake of being nimshach downwards into affect the whole Seder of Istaushele. That's what we call a Makif HaKarov. There's what's called a Makif HaKorev and a Makif HaRoch. We're going to see that the Emes of Makif is what's called a Makif HaRoch. A Makif HaKarov means that it's a Makif, but it's got a certain shaykh. That's what we see, that you have all sorts of wills, all sorts of, how do you call it, retainers. You want to have midas, you want to have this, you want to understand, you want to bring the understanding of the midas. Hopefully that's what you want. And you want to do all sorts of good zachen. But that's all not the emeser rotten. That's rotten. That's got yachas to the in Yonim how they're already the building of the nefesh. But there's what's called a rotzen poshut, a rotzen atzmi inside the yid, but that's the etzem rotzen. To be shot to the rotzen of the Eibishter be emes l'mayla mikol medidas v'hak. Boilers are not biyachas lazy Indian, but it's purely for the sake of it. Not because you want to understand, because you want midas, because you want. It's all holy thing, a great thing, very powerful. Over, how do you call it? Ein oid, holy one is who levade. That's another type of it. That's makif harachot. That's called the Emes makif, and that doesn't have to do with the shtaush. We're going to see about that now as we go along. And that's connected with this idea of Kes Hashem Tui. That's called Kes Hashem Tui. The Gilui and Seiv, so he says, Yad Shorish Harishoin B'Pchinas Klolos Ha'ir the Erein Seish L'Pnei HaChimtzum. As we go back to the first Shorish of these Gimel Kesarim, then he said you come into the oil of the Eibishter, how he's already been nimshak min ha'atzma. In other words, it's oirein say, not atzma say. It's only the oil which went out of the eye. So Enoch Hanami very high in Yonim, of it's all in an oil which is only been, as it were, miskala from you. It's not Mami Shadikot, the Atzmos, you know, the famous Chabadske Indian that we want Atzmos. So nowadays we put in the word now. The Chabadske always said over that, just oil that we want Atzmos. Omnam, Kesher Hashem, Toiv. I know, Gam came to the Malchus, Ukiyadua. Yeah, Kesher Hashem Toiv was also the Indian from Malchus. Shem, who Prince Malchus, we explained that Merchant comes Shem. Achin is Prince Malchus. Kemoi Shehi Mislabesis, Bepia Levira Birudim. He said, that Indian with Kesher Hashem Toiv, but that's higher than all these Kesser. The Kesser of Malchus to Atik Lubez to bring about the world. But the Indian Kesher Hashem Toiv is that we're going to change the world. We're going to make him into something that we're going to make him a kli to deal with that Toinian Mami. That's going to go back into the very etzim of the Rotzen. It's going to get into the very pinkel of a year. He wants to make Mamish and deal with Betach Toinian. I remember I was once sitting by a Fabrengen. A choshev of Misnagid was by the Fabrengen, Reb Nachum Goldsmith, or the Zayda from the Reb Goldsmith was there. He was good, amazing person. And he was by the Fabrengen, he'd been given by the Fabrengen, and he turns to this Misnagid and he says, give a cook. He said, the Rebbe doesn't talk, he doesn't reckon with you, he doesn't even talk to you. He doesn't even talk to you. What do you mean? Does reckon with me? He said, you're just a boreg. He said, you're just a bold. You know, your holiness to make dira b'tatoinim. He said, yeah, Mr. The Eivishter wants the dira b'tatoinim, which he's Indian. He wants it should be a tachton from weeds, because he wants to put himself inside the tachton. You're the one that's supposed to do it. Nobody talks with you per se. Your holiness is only to make dira b'tatoinim. You're just a rotten portion. Allah says, you have nothing to do for yourself in this world. Yeah, the guy that yes. So he said, Kumtois, he said to me in Yiddish, Kumtois, there's no change, you know. There's no rest. You pay in, but you don't get any change. You don't get anything for yourself. You don't understand. He said, where's the rest? It's a very good question. In Yiddish, that means where's the change? Where's your pit for yourself? The poreg is nothing for yourself. So he said, there's nothing for yourself. He said, once you reach that, then the Eivishter helps you that what you really need, that's what you get. If you really need something, the Eivishter to give, no, because you will he'll give you what you really need. Well, there was Bemis, as he was talking, Mr. Talsayan, up in Best Nave. So you guys are not in the mood for these sort of high-level Siddish quips. Did you get it? You got it. Good.
It's the whole Shiva.
Yeah, that's the whole just being a bolt. You're not really here for yourself. You're in the make a deal with talk to eat. I know to that you got to reveal as I will. You don't really want yourself. No, you want what he wants.